So I originally saw this on the Today Show's Pop Star segment, but this is from Chart Data on Twitter, aka X. Morgan Wallen's Last Night is now the longest running number one solo song in Hot 100 history, surpassing Harry Styles as it was. So Morgan Wallen is currently 16 weeks at number one, and Harry Styles was at 15 weeks at number one. All right. So I listened to the Morgan Wallen song on the Today Show, and then I listened to the full version on YouTube. That's a bouncy song. It's okay. It's a country song. It's cool. It's all right. His vocals are really good on it. Song's interesting. But for the most part, if they said this was like number one on the Hot 100 country chart, I would say, yeah, okay, that makes sense. But they're saying it's Hot 100 number one for 16 weeks on the pop chart. And this is a completely different thing because it's not that type of song. Dolly Parton's 9 to 5. Shania Twain's Still the One. Leanne Rimes, How Do I? Dixie Chicks, Landslide. Kenny Rogers, Lady. The Florida Georgia Line with Nelly. That would make sense because it's country and hip hop. Those songs were labeled as country, but they had pop sensibilities to them. Lady A's I Need You Now. There's a lot of songs that's crossed over that if you told me they've been number one for 16 weeks, I would say, well, yeah, there's a big crossover feel about that song. Morgan Wallen, not so much. Now, his fans might tell me, you don't know what you're talking about. He's an amazing artist. Of course, he's number one on the pop chart. And it's like, yeah, listen, I like old country. I'm not a fan of new country because I think new country kind of sounds the same. It's the same thing with hip hop. Like, I love hip hop, but I think a lot of hip hop sounds the same. So I totally understand it. And I do know with Morgan Wallen, whenever Morgan Wallen drops an album, it goes number one pop and number one country. His tours sell out. He has a loyal fan base, even though he's gone through some controversies. If you don't know what the controversies is, Google it. You will find it quite fascinating. But how does Morgan Wallen end up being number one on the pop chart with Last Night? I think it's streaming. I think streaming has a big part of this. So a little disclaimer. So when I was a kid, I used to write down Casey Kasem's top 40 all the time. I would get up every Sunday morning, write down the top 40. I would get mad when my mom didn't wake me up, and I would have like the top 32. It's like, what am I going to do with this? I need the top 40. But I was very in tune about what was number one, what was in the top 10. Like, I love the charts. And when I got older, I became a DJ in college and a music director. And I just lived and breathed Billboard magazine. I love Billboard magazine. Still do. I still pick it up from time to time. So, but I knew the song that held the longest number one at one point was Physical by Olivia Newton-John. Great tune, early 80s song. Number one for like 10 weeks. And she held the record for years until Boyz II Men popped up with End of the Road. End of the Road, big song. It was a number one for 11 weeks. Then Whitney Houston's I Always Love You came out. Monster song. 12 weeks at number one. Then Boyz II Men came back with I'll Make Love to You. That was like 13, 14 weeks at number one. And then they came back again, Boyz II Men, with their duet with Mariah Carey, One Sweet Day. An amazing song. I wish we can hear that song more often. The story behind it is amazing. The song is amazing. That song went 16 weeks at number one. And they held the record for a while. I think the Macarena is 15, 16 weeks at number one. Bruno Mars, Uptown Funk with Mark Ronson, that's 16 weeks at number one. So there's a lot of songs after Olivia Newton-John that just kept on raising the ante what the number one song is. But back then, it was mostly based on radio airplay and sales. And back in the 50s and 60s, you had payola, which ended up being illegal. The government allegedly fixed that. I'm not sure they fixed it too much, but for the most part, it was sales and radio airplay. And if Morgan Wallen stays on this pace, what's up next is Despacito at 17 weeks, the Louis Fonsi song with Daddy Yankee and Justin Bieber, and the song that holds the most weeks at number one is Old Town Road at 19 weeks and number one with Lil Nas X and Billy Ray Cyrus. Now, I'm not a Lil Nas X fan at all. I think his talent is actually overrated. However, Old Town Road was everywhere. You couldn't go anywhere without hearing Old Town Road. Kids were singing it. Old people were singing it. That song was everywhere. So when you tell me that song is 19 weeks at number one, I actually believe it. That Morgan Wallen song is not that song. I don't hear cars bumping last night. I don't hear last night when I walk into stores. I don't hear people just humming the song. And again, his fans might say different, but I'm talking strictly from a pop crossover standpoint. Happy by Pharrell, huge song. It wasn't even, I don't think he's even ranked like 16 of 10 weeks at number one. But that song was huge. People, that song, you couldn't escape Happy by Pharrell. Morgan Wallen's Last Night is not that song. So like I said, I blame streaming for this. So what happened around 2007, Billboard said, okay, we're going to add streaming weighted with song airplay and sales. So it's going to be song airplay, sales, and streaming. Because at that point, YouTube had popped up, Facebook had popped up, and MySpace was king back then. And Billboard was trying to stay current. And by 2018, they said, okay, we're just going to totally weight things with streaming first, record sales, and radio airplay. Because at that point, but Justin Bieber had blew up from MySpace. Soulja Boy had blew up from MySpace. There was a lot of artists YouTube. Justin Bieber blew up on YouTube. Soulja Boy blew up on YouTube. And Billboard made the decision like, okay, we have to factor in YouTube, Facebook, Spotify as for charting these songs. It was good and bad, right? It was good because hip hop songs are now in the top 10 because still a lot of pop stations weren't playing a lot of hip hop songs, K-pop songs, dance songs, country songs. The chart was actually a little bit more equal when he added in streaming as the dominant reason to chart. It was bad because I think a lot of record companies have been manipulating the chart. When you see someone like Taylor Swift or Beyonce, it's not just them, but with someone who has a strong fan base, whenever they drop those albums, all their songs chart in the top 10 or in the top 15, which is almost ridiculous. Because, listen, it's been a long time since I was a teenager, but I think the thing usually happens is if you're a young person and your favorite artist drop an album, you listen to the album, right? Well, the song you listen to the most are the songs that you really like. And then there's a few songs that you kind of like that you kind of listen to once in a while. And then you just kind of skip the rest. Well, the way streaming is today, it just seems like whenever someone like Taylor or Beyonce or somebody puts out an album, all the songs chart, which is just crazy because it's impossible. There's no Thrillers anymore. There's no Purple Rains anymore. As talented as these ladies are, their albums are not great enough where every song is a classic. And again, don't Swifties and everybody, like Beehive, don't jump on me. I'm just saying from a music perspective, most people just don't listen to every song like they're great songs all the time. You kind of pick and choose what you like, right? So I think the record companies has hired people to just constantly stream these albums and songs for their artists. Vice has a great show called Dark Side. They had the start of Dark Side of the Ring, and they had Dark Side in the 1990s and Dark Side of the 2000s. And there was an episode with TRL from MTV. And when TRL was hot, record companies hired phone banks. Some record companies hired phone banks to just constantly call in to get the artists on the chart. And MTV caught wind of this, and they shut it down. I guess they shut it down. I'm not sure how successful they were. And I think the same thing's happening again. I think because streaming has been unregulated for so long, I think some record companies has abused this. Now, do I have any proof on this? I do not. I might be just pumping out hot air. But I think there's something to this when you see Morgan Wallen at number one on the Hot 100 chart. It's funny. If you ask someone which solo artist has the longest number one on the pop chart, Morgan Wallen or Bruno Mars, I bet you people would say Bruno Mars. Because Bruno Mars is played everywhere. He's played on hip-hop and R&B stations. He's played on pop stations. I'm sure that Bruno's probably actually was playing on a country station from time to time. Morgan Wallen's not that guy. He's definitely not played on hip-hop and R&B stations. Maybe a couple, but not that much. He's played on some pop stations, but I don't think it's all pop stations. So his main thing is country music. So again, it's not a knock against him. I think there's some shenanigans going on the streaming. And if this dude is number one after 20 weeks, something is going on. So I do think keep an eye on the writers actors strike, because once that is solved with Amazon Prime and Hulu and Netflix, when they get their money together, I think the next bullseye will be on Spotify and the music streaming platforms, not just because of just the pay for the artists, but I think they should be investigated just for their streaming practices.